Please welcome to the stage Mr. Matt Long.
Sorry. We know it works, huh? Let's see if I can find a presentation here. If John's in the room, I might need your help, John. Not a Mac guy. John Gabrielson, can I get some help up here? Sorry, folks. You want me to sing a song or something while we're waiting here? All right, there we go. I got an Apple phone. I don't have an Apple computer here. Thanks, buddy. Thanks. I think there was supposed to be a break, but we're just blowing right through it. How about that? Where's Dave Weiss? Do I still get money if I mention your name before the thing starts, or? Okay. Now, I figure my go-to, since everybody likes Dave Weiss, is if I'm struggling during a speech, I just bring him up, and then everyone gives an applause. But what a great job he does. So, Dave Weiss, everybody. Ding, ding. I think while John's getting this going, I might just go ahead and start a little bit. And John, you can be part of my presentation. How about that? Keep the glare down, though. There we go. There we go. Yeah, perfect. All right. Awesome. And I guess I can shift this way. Okay, great. All right. Rick, thanks for the awesome intro. My name is Matt Long, and my social media brand and stuff is Woketown. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as all major podcast platforms. I'm also the co-host of the Flat Earth podcast with David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, and Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. So that's right. Before I start, I just want to give a little bit of advice. I know it's easier to avoid awkward situations like meeting new people, but I just want to invite you guys while you're here to relax, be yourselves, and I promise you'll meet some great folks, have some great conversations, and start to forge some relationships that are deeper and more meaningful than the ones you came here to get away from. So how about that? But seriously, if you haven't come and said hi to me, feel free anytime, just grab me, say hey. I'd love to meet all you guys. So some of you guys know my story. I met my wife, Jessica, at a Flat Earth conference in Canada back in August of 2018. And we got married in the following January. And then now had our first kid together. She had 3, I had one of my own, and it's our first together. We had it on November 3rd. Thought about naming it Seattle, just to commemorate the day. But actually, if you guys are doing the math, we got married in January. 11 months later, we had a baby. So anybody that was doing that quick math. So some of you guys that know my story, I was not a conspiracy guy before Flat Earth. I was really just kind of getting back into the Bible and starting to look into things like the age of the earth and evolution, the Nephilim, fallen angels. And so I was watching a lot of stuff by a guy named Rob Skiba. And I really respect all the stuff that Rob does. And I caught a show. He did an interview on Patricia Steer's show, and a lot of times you can't see what the full title is of the video you're about to watch on YouTube, and it said Rob Skiba, how I got into ... And I was like, awesome, more Rob Skiba content. So started watching, he started talking about Flat Earth, and one of the things that he said was, what he should have done at the beginning was go and see what the Bible said. And as soon as he said that, I knew immediately that not only did the Bible correspond with a flat earth, because I'd read the verses. I was in the middle of studying Genesis, but it also aligned with all of my senses. And I believe, based on what 2 Thessalonians says, that we all have an ability to recognize and discern truth if we choose to accept it. So I feel like my conversion was immediate. It was an immediate shot to the chest. And then I proceeded to spend, I'd say the next 2 years making sure I wasn't crazy before I started putting stuff out on Facebook and YouTube, and had a bunch of friends asking me, like, hey, is this flat earth thing a joke, And it was a lot of fun getting to tell them, no, actually, it's not. But if you've watched any of my stuff, I'm going to move this computer a little bit, hopefully not wreck the whole thing. But if you've watched any of my stuff or listened to the podcast, you'll know that I have a biblical worldview. And while I won't apologize for that mindset, I'll at least give you fair warning. And even if you don't share that worldview with me, I hope you can at least agree that there is good and evil in this world, and that battle is one that surpasses the importance of the shape of the earth. So if we can agree on at least that, I'm confident that you'll get something out of today. For me, the importance of the topic of flat earth fluctuates as I dig and discover more each day. At the very least, someone's research into flat earth should absolutely make them question and begin to filter the information that they absorb every day. We absorb a lot of information these days. And while I do think the earth is flat, I would much rather my content lead to someone questioning and thinking as opposed to ultimately accepting my view of the shape of the earth. Today, however, I am to show you that just like my other talks on the Bible, people's issue with the flat earth is 100% a perception issue and actually has nothing to do with the evidence. And that when pursuing truth, especially when comparing reality to the written word or to images on a screen, it's important to have a good versus evil mindset to help you filter information and evaluate the source that you receive that information. And if someone is not actually pursuing truth, it doesn't matter how much evidence you show them, they're going to be stuck in their artificial perception of reality. And that is the intent of the powers that be or evil or the globalists, the elitists. That's their intent, to get you stuck in this perception of reality and actually bank on you not even questioning it. So, spoiler alert, let me change slides here. You and I will probably never go up in a rocket. So we're probably going to be stuck down here evaluating evidence as it relates to the shape of the earth. And not only evaluating, but also filtering, like I said. And here's the crazy thing. Flat earthers have the same evidence that globers do. Evolutionists have the same evidence that creationists do. It's like everyone's playing poker with the same hand. And I'm convinced some people aren't even looking at the right side of the cards, but I digress. My first experience with this notion was with the theory of evolution. And this notion of having to filter evidence, the idea that there's not just evidence, but you have to filter the evidence, or you have to interpret the evidence. I went from never questioning something that I thought was proven to wondering how I could ever be fooled by something so ridiculous. And that should have been my first clue right there, if you see that slide. Anytime it takes cartoons to explain something, that should probably be a dead giveaway. Kind of reminds me of something else. But in my 20s, I was a super nerd, devouring physics and astronomy books like candy, trying to figure out exactly how this place worked. And the trap that I fell into was, if you read those books, they'll tell you they have this whole place figured out without God, without a creator. And they speak about it as if it's proven fact and not just theory. And if the powers that be can control the perception of the other side, like flat earth, people like myself, before a few years ago, will just reinforce the deception for them. People like teachers, people like homeschooling parents. As long as people think of a square pancake flying through space when someone talks about flat earth, it's not going to matter how many times you say Chicago skyline, or it's not going to matter how many times you say that NASA has satanic roots, or that you can still circumnavigate it. People are not going to listen. And it's the genius behind the great perception, because in a game where everyone has the same cards, they've figured out a way for those cards to not even matter, or at least what's on those cards. So when I give my talks on the Bible, I show that the books contained in the New Testament are the most historically accurate pieces of literature in the history of the world, that there's over 24,000 pieces of manuscript evidence available for those books, and that when comparing that to the second place book in the history of the world, it's the equivalent of the New England Patriots winning a football game 74-2 and doing that 320 straight times. No matter what your opinion of the Patriots or their coach or their quarterback, if that was the case, you'd have to admit they were the greatest of all time, even if they weren't your favorite team. Well, again, that's what the Bible does to the second most prolific book in the history of the world, Homer's Iliad. And those 24,000 manuscripts were quoted 86,000 times prior to 250 AD. And the events contained in those manuscripts are 100% backed up by the extra-biblical historical accounts. And the last video uploaded on my channel is about that if you want to go check out that more in depth. But I also mention how the Bible is not just one book, but many. We kind of look at it as like this magical book handed down from God, which it kind of is, but it's also real men giving real accounts during a real time about real events. And the authors of the Bible surrounding Jesus' life, they weren't killed for what they believed. They were killed for what they saw, if you just read their own words. They weren't killed because they were going around starting uprisings and toppling governments. They were telling people to be nice to each other and not to lie to each other. So they weren't killed for starting revolutions. They were killed because the devil wanted the story to die. However, if you would have told me all those facts in my 20s, when I was reading physics books and astronomy books instead of the Bible, it wouldn't have mattered, because the heliocentric model that I perceived to be proven fact contradicted page 1 of the Bible, so who cares what else it says? So when I found out by the grace of God that the fossil record could actually be better explained by the worldwide flood, as opposed to millions of years of non-catastrophic processes, it started me down a long path which ultimately led to flat Earth. But no one could have forced me until I was ready to pursue it myself, until I was ready to acknowledge the darkness and pursue light and no longer be willingly ignorant, like 2 Peter 3 says. So by the time flat Earth came along, I was ready. I had learned that there was not always just evidence, but interpretation of evidence. I heard Rob Skiba, a guy that I respected on many other topics, looking into it. And so I knew I had preconceived notions of it and perceptions, but if Skiba was considering it, I knew that there had to be another side to things like sunset, sunrise, circumnavigation, and not falling off the edge, which people believe are caused by them living on a ball. But in actuality, I found out that these things simply correlate to them living on a ball. Because if the main characteristic of a ball is curvature, yet time and time again we see instances of us being able to see things over long distances that we shouldn't be able to, we need to go look for other explanations and other models. So if sunset, sunrise, circumnavigation, not falling off the edge have explanations on a flat Earth, and we can't detect a ball, what conclusion are we left to make? And why is that a hard decision? I'll give you an example. When the clock strikes noon and I go eat lunch, my action of eating food correlates to the clock striking noon, but the clock did not cause me to go eat. And you can just prove that if just one time I go eat at a different time, or one time I go eat without a clock even being in the room. So if we have just one example of the heliocentric spinning ball model not working, like being able to see things that are too far away, we need to scrap it, we need to start over. Especially if we can show how these other phenomena can be explained on other models. However, we live in a world that hates truth, and that's why I think the topic of mindset and perception is an important one. So, who here decided to wear clothes today? Pretty much all of us? Yep. First time I asked that question, Rick Hummer yelled out that his wife made him, which I believe it. But clothes can say a lot about a person. I mean, a man may wear a suit to look professional or to appear successful. A man like me might wear a t-shirt to be comfortable or look approachable. But while clothes can absolutely speak to the type of person that you are, they're not you. When I go to bed tonight and I take these clothes off and I go to bed, everything that's left, the real me, is going to go to sleep. And in that same fashion, we're going to take these bodies off one day as well. And just like clothes, your body can say a lot about the things that you value or give insight into your inner person, but once again, it's not the real you. It's not the real you that can make sounds in your head without moving your mouth, or see places you've been without going there, or even opening your eyes. So in the spirit of acknowledging that this concept is totally foreign to us, why wouldn't we start this investigation into the nature of the things that we can't observe with an investigation into the things that we can observe? Because according to my Bible, they were both created by the same person. Throwing stuff off the stage here. And just like our clothes and body can tell people a lot about us, the creation can tell us a lot about the Creator. I mentioned earlier that likely you and I will not be taking a trip on a rocket anytime soon. Well, similarly, we're not going to have access to a time machine either. So just like we don't have the ability to go high enough to see the creation in its entirety, we also don't have the ability to go back in time and see how it was started and how it was put together. However, if I was going to prove where I was made and where I was born, I would go to the written record. I'd go to my birth certificate. And you see, we've been groomed and programmed to think that videos and images are superior to the written word. However, if something were to happen to all of our electronics, there would actually be very little of us, documentation-wise, that would survive to the next age. Thus, the importance of the written account. So, what does the written account, the book that I deem as ultimate truth, say about creation? Well, I'm going to start with what it doesn't say, because there's two verses that people inevitably and immediately start with and regrettably never research past. It's Isaiah 40:22, where Isaiah says that he talks about the circle of the earth, which, and people will say, well, he's talking about a sphere. Well, I agree. He says it's the circle of the earth, but something can be a circle and flat, just like a pizza. The thing is, in Isaiah 22:18, he uses the Hebrew word for ball when talking about something being tossed like a ball, but when describing the earth, he says circle. Then people inevitably bring up the four corners of the earth and says, well, how can a circle have four corners? Well, first of all, how can a sphere have four corners? But when you divide the circle into quarters, like most of these verses reference, you actually get four corners, just like pizza slices have corners. Just like when John mentions in Revelation seeing the angels standing on the four corners of the earth, it makes sense that he could see them all in the same place, because they were all standing in one place at the center of the biblical flat earth, otherwise known as the North Pole, the place where all compasses point, which potentially sits beneath the emerald rainbow of the very throne of God, the northern lights, which John saw in Revelation 4:3. The next verse people bring up is Job 26:7, where it says, he hangs the earth on nothing. Well, earth only means land, so yes, he doesn't hang the earth on anything. It's set on a foundation and on pillars, just like it says later in Job 38. And those are God's words, not Job. In John 1, we see that he created all things. In Romans 1, we know that the invisible things of God, including his eternal power, can be seen through the things that were made. And because of that, we're without excuse in acknowledging him. In 2 Peter 3, we see how some are willingly ignorant, like I mentioned earlier, of the fact that in the beginning, the earth was standing out of water and in water. We get further clarification in Genesis 1, where God creates the firmament to separate those very same waters, the waters above from the waters below. Then in Psalm 19, we see that while the heavens declare the glory of God, it's that same firmament that shows his handiwork. And this creation speaks to us by day and shows knowledge by night, and there is no language where its voice is not heard. And this is also backed up in Job 38. When Job questions God, God replies, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? And then God challenges Job's lack of knowledge by taking him on a verbal tour of creation, starting with, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? So the knowledge of the creation is a noble pursuit. Most of you have probably heard all those verses, but I invite you, if someone questions one, just tell them to Google Hebrew cosmology. There's no reason even to get in all the verses, but in short, almost 70 times the Bible talks about the sun, moon, and stars as moving, and not once describes the earth as moving. In fact, it says it is fixed and immovable. It says that the earth, which only means land, is standing on a foundation set on pillars under a dome or firmament with literal water right above our heads. Someone may say, well, that's Old Testament stuff, Matt. Okay, well, then what did Jesus say in the New Testament, which I told you earlier is the most historically reliable collection of books in the history of the world? Did he believe in our current heliocentric model? After all, John 1 says that he was there at creation, and I think it's pretty clear in saying that he was instrumental in the entire process. The answer is no, he did not believe in our current heliocentric model. Take Matthew 24, for example. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. We learn a few things from this statement by Jesus. One, he doesn't believe the sun is a star because he says that the stars fall, but the sun is only darkened. There's a differentiation there. The moon does not reflect the light of the sun. The moon gives off its own light. That was point 2, sorry. 3, he doesn't believe the stars are billions of miles away because there's no large period of time waiting for them to get here. Number 4, he doesn't believe that the stars are millions of times the size of the earth because even though they all fall to earth, stuff still actually happens after that. And again, he would know because according to John 1, he was there at creation. Also my favorite, in Luke 12, Jesus says, you hypocrites, talking to the Pharisees, how is it that you can discern the face of the sky and the earth, but you cannot discern the time? In other words, you guys understand how this place works, but you can't understand the age in which you live, meaning that their cosmology at the time was correct. And what was their cosmology? So, if we don't believe the lie of evolution or the heliocentric model, and we ground our faith firmly in the notion that man was previously more advanced instead of less advanced, and give credence to the reliability of the scriptures, it gives a fairly clear picture of what the creation actually is. And why wouldn't that be important? Why would that be important? Because again, like I mentioned earlier, because we can get to know the invisible things of God through the things that were made, including his eternal power. So, now, if that's the case, if we can get to know God through the creation, of course the forces of evil are going to try to dilute that. And how do you dilute something? Well, you pour it into something bigger, like infinite space, and you teach people that they're insignificant, that they're merely statistical probabilities of an ever-expanding, potentially infinite universe, creating an artificial system that they can control, removing the real God from the equation, and setting themselves up to be gods of a clandestine religion that people don't even know they're a part of. And how do you do that? Well, you control their minds. In George Orwell's 1984, one of the elites says the main character, while explaining how they've created a dual system of cosmology for their purposes of control, he says that we control matter because we control the mind. Reality is in the skull. Again, it's all about perception. Crow 777 talks frequently about the fact that you cannot create truth, you can only discover it, and how nature never lies. They have to create their own artificial reality because they cannot rule and control the original, the one created by God. Remember, I said earlier we all have the same evidence. Well, that evidence is nature. It's the creation itself. And if you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you're not going to understand that. If you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you won't see the connection to the fact that the word nashah in Hebrew can mean to lift up like a rocket to space, or it can mean to beguile like the serpent beguiled Eve in the garden. If you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you're not going to see the snake tongue in the NASA logo. Or the fact that the Hebrew word for tongue, lashon, can also mean fork of flame. If you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you're not going to think it's weird that NASA was literally started by Nazis, Freemasons, and magicians. You're not going to understand Napoleon when he said that man will believe anything as long as it's not in the Bible. If you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you're not going to understand Max Planck, who said a scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. And if you don't have a good versus evil mindset, you're just going to think flat earth is stupid, and that the idea of hiding the real creation is just too big a conspiracy, or brush it off as not affecting your daily life. The good versus evil mindset is the perception by which you should pursue and discern truth and filter information. It's your light in the darkness, and that lack of mindset is what is keeping others asleep. So I've talked about perception, I've talked about the role of creation, talked about the motive behind it all. We've talked about needing a good versus evil mindset, but what's keeping folks from waking up and just even considering an alternative cosmology? Well, we all know about algorithms at this point, and D. Marvel talked a good bit about it in the talk before me. But I've experienced the suppression firsthand, as I'm sure most of you have. It used to be that you could go type in 200 proofs to YouTube, and Eric Dubé's 200 proofs the Earth's not a globe would be the #1 video. However, if you type in 200 proofs flat Earth, it's not in the top 15. Now if you type in 200 proofs, it's also not in the top 15. But it's unbelievable how obvious to us some of that suppression to be, and how hard that is to communicate to someone who's not able to see that. I was on an app called TikTok, getting around 40 to 80,000 views per video. Then one day, my view counts dropped to below 1,000. I started a hashtag called Flat Earth 101, and it had about 230,000 views between 9 different videos. But when I started searching Flat Earth 101, it said no views, no videos. And people started telling me how you could click on the audio for my videos, and TikTok is kind of a music app, and you can click on the audio file and you can see who has made videos with that audio file. And because I was using some original music, it wasn't original to me, but I was taking it from royalty-free music, you click on my audio and it would say 0 videos correlated to that audio. Pretty frustrating and a bit depressing for someone who's putting a lot of effort into what he deems as truth and what he thinks is good content. So, but these things have been put in place primarily so that another 2015 doesn't happen, when Flat Earth exploded, when you could still search and find good content out there. The best guy I know about getting around algorithms is David Weiss, DITRH. Clap, there we go, see, yep. Right. Dave only sends videos that are already in playlists so that he knows what video is going to follow. Pretty genius. He's been seen airdropping flat earth memes to entire crowds at concerts. And he's created the most amazing app out there, the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. Yeah, awesome. Dave has poured his heart and soul and money into what Paige calls his second girlfriend. He's literally worked on it every day since he launched it, making sure there's videos on there. But he's created the greatest tool for spreading truth, the truth of creation that I've ever seen. You guys need to download it, you need to share it, you need to gift it to people, you need to get the word out there to the people in your circles. It's amazing. But again, the app, the playlist, the airdrops, that's just to get around the algorithms and to spread. There are things that were put in place long ago to make sure, before the algorithms, to make sure that people don't even have the time or the desire to look into things like evolution or the heliocentric model. And the biggest one of all is slavery through debt and money. The Bible says in Proverbs 22 that the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. And would you agree that debt on houses, cars, schools, credit cards, etc., is one of, if not the leading cause of our inability to slow down, take time, read the Bible, and consider the nature of our world and evaluate truth? I would. And is it not the exhaustion caused by that slavery that leads us to want to relax and get caught up in TV shows, movies, sports, and things that we can passively absorb as opposed to actively pursue? This goes for relationships too, by the way. But I think you will all agree that it's easier to absorb a lie than it is to pursue and discern truth. It takes research, it takes diligence, and above all, it takes time that slaves typically don't have because they're busy working through their debts. And I'm not innocent of this, by the way. Just throwing it out there. You've all heard this before, but you cannot serve two masters. You can be a slave to money, debt, and the rich, or you can be a slave to truth. And don't get me wrong, money is an awesome servant when you have it working for you, but it's a terrible master, and it has most of society distracted. We can read the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6. It says, "Please forgive us our trespasses." But if you read in the King James, it actually says, please forgive us our debts. Well, why would we need forgiveness for our debts? It's because it's getting in the way of our pursuit of truth. Now, I agree that debt and credit are something that this society is based on. And if the Bible describes debt as slavery, of course, this world is going to make debt and lines of credit something seemingly normal and easy to get. And yes, the majority of people have debt, and it ranges from a little to a lot. But let's not forget the words of Mark Twain, who said, as soon as you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. Now, this is extreme, I know, but I only say it to hopefully get you thinking a little bit differently. Understanding that money in the sense of dollars doesn't exist in the way that inches don't exist. You can't just go grab a few inches, right? You've got to have something to measure. Well, in that same way, you can't just go grab a few dollars. The actual paper dollar is only physically worth its ability to burn or wipe something. It's just another element of control, another way to keep us enslaved, a way for us to work for something that they can arbitrarily change the value of overnight. So it truly doesn't represent anything. My daughter's grandmother came over from Romania to escape communism. She said that because the government was coming in and taking ownership of the farms and all the assets, it created a large underground cash-based market. People were hoarding cash in their mattresses. The government caught wind of this and overnight just decided to change the currency. They said they would honor whatever people had in the bank, but people who had large amounts of cash went from millionaires to poor overnight. The U.S. is currently doing the same thing, just at a slower rate. We're like frogs in boiling water. So if the value of paper money can be changed or scrapped entirely overnight, it truly doesn't represent anything. Material value, material wealth doesn't come in the form of paper. It comes in the form of resources and energy. You may have $100,000 in the bank, but you take that out in all hundreds, pretty soon all you're going to have is a really pretty fire or really dirty napkins that don't work very well. We need to be reinvesting our paper money into resources and energy that no one can devalue. And that's only material worldly things, right? Real eternal wealth comes in the form of relationships. First and foremost, a relationship with your Creator that you can gain insight on through this creation. And secondly, relationships with all these people that are on the ride with you. Close relationships with your Creator and others around you can teach you how to be rich as opposed to how to get rich. So I invite you to consider this weekend, if this is important enough to you, we need to change the way that we view things like debt, slavery, control, and most of all, the importance of truth in our lives. We've established that debt leads to slavery, but truth can set you free. That's what Jesus said. And the truth has set me free because it's been that pursuit of truth that has led me to be here with all of you, to find my wife and the literal birth of a new human. Like, it's changed my life. It's set me free. And because we don't owe anyone anything, and because we've built margin into our lives, we're not triggered by events on the world stage. We don't swallow things just because a pastor or politician or someone of authority says it. We make up our own mind about things. We decide who we associate with. We decide how to raise our children, and the system of perception is slowly losing a hold on us. So I invite you to pause and reflect for 5 minutes this weekend and work backwards from the lifestyle that you want to live, or better yet, what you want your life to stand for. And if the things that you're pursuing personally and professionally, and the people that are in your ear, if they're not lining up with that, you're going to have to get rid of them. Don't be a slave forever, and know that not all prisoners live behind bars. You are a prisoner if you're stuck carrying what your parents or your loser freaking friends think about you. It's a process, unraveling your perceptions, but a worthwhile one. We need to jump in, start swimming, and not save anything for the way back. If the lives we're living are not more exciting than Netflix, we might not be picking a big enough fight with the devil. Or as Romans says, with those who hold back the truth and unrighteousness. Because when the truth is replaced by silence, the silence is a lie. The other day I heard a story of an older woman in Cuba. She was there spreading the truth as I believe it. She hopped on a dump truck, which is basically their public transit system, and she got groped by a construction worker. And when she turned around to confront him, she was groped by another one. and the situation started to look pretty precarious until she stood up and proclaimed her love and protection from Jesus Christ, and then the men stopped and she got off unharmed. The director of the mission told this story to an American CEO who was so inspired he wanted to go down there and buy her a car so that she wouldn't have to deal with that anymore. So the CEO goes down, he sits down with her, and he wants to know what's the one thing that he could give her that would exponentially help her ministry and keep her safe. And the lady thought for a second, and she said, "I could really use a flashlight." And the other night, I was in a dark room, and I grabbed my phone and tried to turn on the flashlight, but I accidentally hit the calculator. And it did me absolutely no good in that moment. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that when navigating through a dark realm like this place, light and truth will help you find the way far better than math and science. Because if you can't get past the darkness in the room, you'll never be able to figure out how it was put together. And even though a dark room can be scary, by simply adding a little bit of light, the perception of that room is totally changed, even though physically it's the same, just like our shared evidence. But the flat earth is not lacking in evidence, right? The evidence is all around us. It's in nature. It's 100% how the observer perceives that evidence. And that perception is so powerful that it can make someone standing still tell you that they're spinning. And it can make someone standing straight up tell you that they're upside down. And it can even make that person call someone an idiot for questioning that. I believe the shape of the earth is super important. Obviously, I'm here speaking with you about it today, but not nearly as important as recognizing that truth is good and that there is and always will be a perception war against it. You must have a good versus evil mindset in order to recognize that. If you don't, you're just going to get lost in the dark. You need light and truth to help you find the way. And while on that journey, you may find that those three things are actually the same thing. You might even find that they're the same person. Thank you for your time.